Welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series brought to you by AKFI Sustainability Association, the world's first non-profit industry association committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. Actionable ESG Talk series bring together great minds to discuss the current state and the future of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. And I should add AI. I'm delighted to be here with our guest. Thank you, John, for joining us. And we have an exceptional guest today. They are all exceptional, but John primarily is the one that came up with the idea of carbon trading, and he implemented it. It's a serial entrepreneur which developed policies, projects, and business associated with environmental, energy, and sustainability matters. Created the first emission credit brokerage, as I mentioned, the first brokerage firm, and several others. And he advised governments, trade associations, companies, and environmental advocacy groups on energy and environmental trading. Since 2022, he has advised two sustainability-focused consulting firms, one in Europe and the other in the United States. Welcome, John, and thank you for taking the time today. We usually start with a large topic about the crystal ball. We call it the future trends. So what's on your crystal ball?
Well, my crystal ball only applies to a few things that I know, and I only know a few things, but I know them pretty well. If we're talking about the trading of environmental assets that would have a large background on, I think you're just going to see more of that and extended to different domains. You'll see biodiversity trading emerging more and more. You're going to see something like trading programs for hydrogen and plastics. Unfortunately, in a few years, all too few, there'll be more plastics in the ocean than there will be fish in terms of weight. That's not good. All right. The use of market-based approaches have been proven to work. The whole Smithian concept of the invisible hand. There is an invisible hand, and it's there, and nothing stops it. The incentives, sticks work well to achieve regulatory objectives, but carrots even work better. Carrots is what gets people to work Saturday night, Sunday morning, engineers, creative, on their own, leaving companies with new ideas. It's a whole boiling pot of energy that gets released when you've got carrots. So what we've seen starting in 1976 with the first trading programs, environmental trading programs started in the United States. That was in 1976. It really emerged much more aggressively in the early 80s, and then adopted as part of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change with a pilot series of projects called JI, Joint Implementation, and then embrace under the Kyoto Protocol. It really doesn't make too much difference if the United States stays in the Paris Agreement or leaves in the Paris Agreement. These aren't political issues anymore. They're survival issues. So you see in China, adopted many pilot programs now being integrated into trading programs. You're going to see the same thing happen with biodiversity. Much more heterogeneous, much more difficult to manage, but clearly it's not just coming, it's emerging, but you don't notice it. Water trading, the absolute same thing. So we have a limited resource. One of the best ways to manage the limited resources is with market-based approaches. Now that there's so much experience with market-based approaches, the applications are beyond my brain. There's too much energy out there, fertile energy, and now knowledge and proof that these market-based approaches work. So that reading that crystal ball is easy. That's an easy one. I'll comment about ESG and sustainability. Um, some philosopher or poet said a rose by any other name is a rose. Whether you call it ESG or you call it appropriate risk management, it doesn't make any difference. The policies that ESG and sustainability represent are being integrated into the warp and woof of what's happening at the board level and what's happening at the C level. It will not be apparent to people because it just becomes integrated into the day by day activities of a firm. So in 5 or 10 years, when somebody says, "What are you doing about ESG and sustainability?" the people won't be able to answer because it's what's happening every day. Like, what are you doing about hiring the minorities? It's not being discussed anymore. It's what's happening every day because we need that talent to be successful in the business world. So I think that's an easy observation to prognosticate when something is working, when it's working and it's allowing you to product discriminate in the marketplace and survive and thrive. It's going to be adopted by others. If it's not, you're just going to be a legacy dead meat.
And actually, I'll, you know, make a couple of points on or in what you're saying. And one interesting point is actually, if you look at trading, trading is part of the financial system, financial operations of a company. So that links it to two elements: risk and reward. Risk, which is not following the ESG, the sustainability. And as you said, a rose under any name, it's a rose. The trading systems connect with the risk. People trade, and when they trade, they look at the risk, and also they look at the reward, which is the financial reward in particular. So I think we'll see, as you said, reinforcing what you said, uh, it will be part of strategy, not only part of reporting, and will be as much on the balance sheet of a company as it will be on the strategy and the application of strategy. It will be daily operations and financial operations as much as technical. And so
It's more powerful than just that. I'm sorry to give you an anecdote, but it's a good one. When the acid rain regulations went into effect in the United States, I remember being meeting with electric utility, and this was quite early on. And I was talking about trading and how uh, people in that room who were responsible for designing equipment and buying equipment and putting together their compliance strategy, they will learn about puts and calls and butterfly spreads and the use of all these techniques. So we had a break for coffee, and a gentleman who was head of the strategic planning, who was responsible for coal switching or switching to natural gas or buying a scrubber. He came up to me and started poking at me and say, I don't know about that stuff, but I know about engineering and that we're not going to get into that stuff, blah, 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 blah. 6 months later or a year later, I heard that, and I told him that, well, when the incentives are in the right place, you'll learn about this because you're smarter than I am. You're a good engineer, you know math. You'll pick up all that puts and calls stuff just like that. I had heard that he now had performance standards where he had a bonus predicated on how he was going to manage their footprint. Okay. So that carrot was there. He was smart and probably is still very, very smart, but his energy went not just into coal buying, natural gas buying, selecting scrubber. It was now part of the portfolio that he had to manage with that incentive at the right spot. Okay. Getting it from the top. The top was we need to assure compliance and we need to do it in the most cost-effective way that our stakeholders feel comfortable with. With those constraints, what can you do? And if you're smart, you not only do it well for the company, but you do it well for yourself financially and career-wise. So the diffusion of these market-based approaches take place at not just at the trading level, but the operational level. People are making decisions. Should I buy this? Should I not buy that? Furthermore, when you look at uh, what's on the balance sheet, you're going to see more and more scope one, what are called scope 1, 2, and 3, which are different ways to describe what your carbon footprint might be, or any kind of externality footprint might be, but in particular carbon. You're going to see more and more of that on the balance sheet. What is our position? What is our assets? And what are our liabilities? So that's happening, but that is happening very, very slowly because this issue of how do you measure scope 1, 2, and 3 is not uniform. So some people use different ways, different metrics. So until there's some kind of uniform system, it becomes harder to put it on the balance sheet. Whereas money is very simple to put on the money balance sheet. We know what a dollar is.
You're absolutely right, but you make me thinking of the principle of double materiality, which is now enshrined in Europe, in California, in a few other states in the US, where scope 3 carbon footprint from your suppliers, not yours, because most of that is produced by your suppliers in the supply chain. It comes on your balance sheet in the form of double materiality. It becomes, and I know everybody is scrambling now to figure out what means double materiality, how we report it, what we report on. We went from the era of greenwashing to the green hashing, trying to hide everything because we don't know what to do. But to me, this is a healthy change of the industry. And we'll have a question on AI shortly because we cannot talk about this without AI.
Well, technologies diffuse, and there's sort of a well-known diffusion curve where there's early adopters, and those early adopters are those entities that can benefit right away. But then you've got other adopters who are looking and say, did that work? Did that work over here? And then they start adopting. And then, of course, you have the laggards who, hell no, we won't go. We don't buy into that. We're not even going to buy black and white television sets and sell them or whatever it is. I'm not criticizing people. People make their own decisions. But when a good idea when an idea is adopted and it's working, then you've got a big secondary community that's watching this. And because of the benefits or of the internet and the web and all those services, the ideas diffuse like this. They absolutely diffuse so much more rapidly. It's not like it was 100 years ago when you're, moving from certain technologies, and then people didn't even know about it because the people who had the human capital were not in South America. They were maybe in Europe or Poland or United States. That was hard to diffuse. Now the diffusion is how should we measure it? Not hours, it could be minutes in some cases. When a new idea is patented or a new idea is proven to be successful, there's thousands of adopters who are ready, willing, and able to internalize those financial benefits that come from that, or the recognition benefits that allows you to product discriminate. So we're saying about about measuring supply chain footprints. That's complicated. And I used to manage it being an officer in an engineering company. And we used the best engineering practice we knew of, but somebody else in California was maybe using something slightly different, and somebody in Europe may be slightly different. So there has to be harmonization, if not harmonization, standardization, so we can compare one to the other. And that's a complicated process, but it will diffuse like all other technologies diffuse.
Well, two things actually. One, uh, I think when we talk about future trends, we are in the innovator's dilemma space, right? So the early innovators, the early adopters will reap probably most of the benefits from AI, from applying sustainability, from understanding double materiality, not only reporting on it. And I would bring a footprint. AKFI is actually looking to develop a standard exactly for the supply chain to help with the I would love to hear also what you're doing with your companies once we talk about AI.
Well, AI is a tool. It's not the answer. Like Excel was not is a tool, but it wasn't the answer for bookkeeping or for other products and services. So when you look at two recent technologies, I'm pretty familiar with the use of blockchain, not just for creating coins like Bitcoin, but the use of blockchain for tracking attributes. I was involved in developing a blockchain-based system for tracking organic palm oil or palm oil that was not created by the devastation of a forest, by putting in monoculture, but done in a way that made people feel comfortable that they were looking out for indigenous people, that it was organic, that was not contaminated, et cetera. That was a complicated process, and it takes lots and lots of people to participate in that process. So, you can track where it came from, when it was put onto the truck, when did the lorry bring it to the dock, when did it go onto the dock, when it was received at Antwerp, and then when was it used in Switzerland to make chocolate. You
Okay.
can track all of that, but it requires the participation of all these different parties all the way along the line. So the technology is one thing, but unfortunately, we have to deal with human beings, and it's that adds another complexity to the whole process of diffusion, especially when you have lots of parties involved in a supply chain. But progress is being made because blockchain was just an idea 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I did a lot of work in Russia, the Soviet Union, what have you. You couldn't get through the gatekeeper to talk about blockchain. Today, you can't get through because there's 20 other people already there with their technology. All right. The same thing is happening with AI. 5 or 6 years ago, AI was just science fiction, just science fiction. 3 years ago, I got involved and started working on AI. It was still, it was still not embraced by the commercial community. Today, today, C-level trading people, board level people are scratching their head saying, how can we adopt this? We don't want to be the last one off the Titanic. We want to be, we want to be a mover, uh, we want to be a price maker, not a price taker. So how do we do this? So there's energy looking for AI and blockchain solutions. Whereas 10 years ago, they weren't even in anybody's mind space. Now they're in mind space. And the trick is putting them together with other technologies to solve a whole lot of problems. And if it's an ESG problem, if it's a sustainability problem, if it's a supply chain problem, if it's a business continuity problem, if it's any kind of risk problem, how do we put it together like a recipe? But our recipe will be different than your recipe. So how do we do that? That's where the action, I believe, is. And it's idiosyncratic to the specific company and specific need. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. And actually, as you're going through that, I was reflecting on uh, the work I'm doing at Cornell with different students, and the common theme AI is we love AI, but we need data. We need quality data. We need clean data. We need data in a place we can find it, right? So when I describe this food chain, this supply chain, this food chain, actually what is changing a lot now in the supply chain, the information has to flow both ways. The request has to flow toward the companies. Give me your, access to your data or information based on your data. Fill this report. And now the data has to flow back to the chocolate maker in Switzerland to aggregate everything, and on the way, every supplier has to talk to their customers and so on, and pass the data along. It has to be quality. It has to be, as you mentioned at the beginning, is financial data. It has to be out. It has to be accessible, right? It's not enough to say I told you so.
You bring up a very good point, sorry for an unseemly advertisement, but the data that's on the supply chain is private data. When people are using ChatGPT or they're using Claude or they're using our system, if you're just sucking in, hoovering in like a giant vacuum cleaner what's out there publicly, that's very useful. It's extremely useful, but it's not the same thing as what's on your hard drive. What's on your hard drive is the good stuff that will convert that into very useful data to extremely useful data. So how do you build systems that allow you to pull in domain specific knowledge and benefit on what's on your hard drive and your supplier's hard drive, because people don't want to share that information. That's the good stuff. Don't want to share that. But so there are systems, and we're developing a system, actually have a tool right now that allows you to, in the domains that we're paying attention to, pick up what's on your hard drive for your use. But I'm not sure that too many companies want to share that with somebody on the next level in the supply chain. That, does
Uh,
that make sense?
Absolutely, and the art is to but they do supply, let's go back to financial reporting. They do supply data to the people in the supply chain. So we need to figure out a way. But as you're describing, the data is like an iceberg. Right now, we see only 10% of the ice, and 90% is submerged. And as you said, on these drives and private clouds and so on, data centers. And this is the data that we need for sustainability.
No question. There's absolutely no question about it. But the difference is, and I'm sorry for there is a difference, that either the SEC or the investors or the financial entities that you're working with are not going to write a check. They're not going to support your project unless they see that private data. So now you're sharing it sort of a tete-a-tete, just with that entity over there, with an understanding that they're not going to share it with anybody else, because that's the whole nature of private data. That's what gives me a comparative advantage. But there will be changes. I believe there will be changes only because the market requires it. Forget what the government wants. When the market wants it, it will happen. Just like the insurance industry, without getting into that discussion, is being devastated by events in Florida and certainly by the unfortunate events in California. There will be changes in how we manage risk. There will be changes how underwriters charge you for measuring that risk, and more you will see people being forced to share private data.
My point is actually we've done it once with financial data. We have financial analysts, we have private investors, private capital, and so on. So there are solutions on how to provide the answer to the basic question in investing, which is what is my risk, what is my reward, you know. And I think the fundamental or one of the fundamental changes we see, sustainability is added to these balance sheets. And I think we have way to communicate already in place because all these industries are mature. You mentioned, for instance, the insurance industry, the financial industry. They always have to assess. It's nothing new there. Okay, it's added risk. There is an environmental risk. There is a social risk. There is a stakeholders risk. But you're adding actually clarity to the operations of these companies, as you also kindly mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, right? One day this will become just part of normal operations. As you report on how much capital you got, how much capital you spent, how much you pay interest to the bank, and so on.
that 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 becomes a normal practice in some sectors is a fact that's yet to occur. It is occurring in some. Clearly, in the insurance industry, you cannot get insurance without showing everything you've got. With respect to developing green projects from impact investors, they want to see the same thing. How are you affecting indigenous people in Bolivia? How are you affecting, those kinds of things in terms of the marketplace? Under the Paris Agreement, the highest level of tradable carbon asset is called the Article 6, because it's Article 6 in the Paris Agreement, which requires a disclosure of how you are affecting a whole lot of ESG related, sustainability related, indigenous people related, even gender equality kinds of women's rights. Those kinds of things are being looked at from an Article 6 perspective, from an impact investing perspective. So when there's money out there that drives something, those project developers, those consultants, those investors as a whole club that participates in the decision-making process are going to adopt and respond. They're going to adopt and respond and package, and they're good, solid men and women who do this work, considerations that speak to these issues of sustainability. Does that make sense to you? That's where the rubber meets the road.